conference room aboard the Vaxil flagship was massive. It could hold 300 of the Empire's finest military officers. Today, it held only 12 beings. 11 Vaxil commanders sat in their ceremonial armor, their gray skin marked with the tattoos of 1,000 conquests. At the far end of the long table stood a single human woman, ambassador, wore simple black clothing with no medals or decorations. She was small compared to the towering Vaxil warriors. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat style. Her face showed no emotion as she looked at the most powerful military leaders in the known galaxy. She had come alone, without guards or weapons. This made some of the Vaxil smile. They thought she was foolish. Overlord Thrain sat at the head of the table. He was the supreme military commander of the Vaxil Empire. His armor bore the marks of 73 conquered species. He had personally led the fleets that brought entire civilizations to their knees. He looked at the human ambassador the way a predator looks at prey. "You requested this meeting, human," Thrain said. His voice was deep and rough. "Speak your words and leave. We have important matters to discuss." Hannah reached into her coat and pulled out a small data device. She placed it on the table. The device projected a holographic map of space between them. Red lines marked the borders of human territory. 47 star systems glowed in blue. Surrounding them on 3 sides was the vast green expanse of the Vaxil Empire. Over 400 systems, dozens of species living under Vaxil rule. "For the past 6 months," Hannah began, her voice calm and clear, "your ships have been entering our territory without permission. Your scientists claim they are conducting surveys. Your military vessels claim they are on training exercises. We know what you are really doing. You are testing us. You want to see if we will respond." One of the commanders laughed. "Your territory? You control 47 systems. We control 400. You have existed as a spacefaring species for barely 300 years. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000. You are children playing at building an empire." Hannah did not react to the insult. She simply pressed a button on her device. The hologram changed. It now showed recordings of Vaxil ships crossing into human space. Dates and times appeared next to each violation. There were hundreds of them. "We have documented every violation," Hannah said. "We have sent formal protests through diplomatic channels 37 times. You have ignored every single one. So I am here to deliver a final message from the Terran Alliance. Our borders are absolute. Any ship that enters Terran space without permission will be destroyed. No warnings will be given. No second chances will be offered. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact." The room went silent for a moment. Then Overlord Thrain began to laugh. It was a deep, booming sound that echoed off the metal walls. The other commanders joined him. Their laughter filled the chamber. "You dare to threaten the Vaxil Empire?" Thrain asked when he finally stopped laughing. "Little human, do you know how many species have stood where you stand? How many ambassadors have tried to warn us away from their pathetic little territories? 73 species thought they could resist us. 73 species now serve the Empire. What makes you think you will be any different?" Hannah gathered her data device and placed it back in her coat. "I have delivered the message I came to deliver. What you do with it is your choice. But understand this, Overlord Thrain. We are not like the other species you have conquered. We do not make threats. We do not bluff. We simply state facts. Your ships will not leave our territory alive if they enter it again." She turned to leave. Her footsteps were the only sound in the suddenly quiet room. Ambassador Thrain called out, "Before you go, let me give you a message to take back to your leaders. The Vaxil Empire goes where it wishes. We take what we want. If your people are foolish enough to attack our ships, we will burn every human world to ash. Your species will become a cautionary tale told to other primitives who think they can stand against us." Hannah stopped at the doorway. She looked back at the Vaxil commanders. For the first time, she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a shark shows before it bites. "You were warned, Overlord," she said. Then she walked out. 3 days later, Admiral Minho stood in the command center of Terran Defense Station Alpha. The station orbited the outer edge of human territory. From here, sensors could detect any ship within 50 light-years. Right now, those sensors were showing something very interesting. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "we have multiple contacts entering Sector 7. I count 300 Vaxel warships. They just crossed the border." Minho nodded slowly. He had been expecting this. He had known they would come. The Vaxel were predictable. They always responded to warnings with force. They believed that might made right. They were about to learn a very hard lesson. "Distance to the fleet?" Minho asked. 2 hours at their current speed, sir." "Very good. Activate Protocol Sentinel. Send the activation codes to all ships. We go to radio silence in 5 minutes. No transmissions to the Vaxel fleet." They were already warned. The officer hesitated. "Sir, regulations require us to issue a warning before engaging hostile forces." Minho looked at the young officer. "We already issued our warning. Ambassador Hannah delivered it personally. They chose to ignore it. Now they will learn that humans always mean what we say." He pressed a button on his command console. Across human space, hidden ships began to move. Weapon platforms that had waited in the dark for decades came online. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment checked their equipment one final time. The Vaxel Empire had been warned. Now, they would discover why humanity had survived everything their violent little planet had thrown at them. They would learn why humans had crawled up from the caves, conquered their own world before reaching for the stars. The warning had been given. The time for talking was over. Fleet Commander Vesh stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars. He had served the Vaxel Empire for 60 years. He had fought in a dozen wars and never lost a single battle. His fleet of 300 ships was the finest fighting force in this sector of space. And right now, they were traveling through human territory like it belonged to them. Because it did belong to them. Or it would soon enough. "Status report," Vesh ordered. His second officer checked the displays. "We are approaching the human colony of New Hanyang. 2 small planets. Mining operations. Approximately 50,000 civilians, according to our intelligence. No military presence detected." Vesh nodded. This was going exactly as planned. The humans would see the might of the Empire and understand their place in the galaxy. They would beg for mercy. They would offer tribute. And if they were very lucky, the Empire might let them survive as servants. "We are receiving a transmission from the colony," the communications officer said. "Put it through." The screen showed a human woman in a simple uniform. She looked young and completely calm. The nameplate on her uniform read Captain Yuna, Vaxel Fleet. "This is Captain Yuna of New Hanyang Station. You have entered Terran territory without authorization. You have 30 minutes to leave before defensive measures are taken." Vesh laughed. "Defensive measures? Little human, look at your sensors. You are facing 300 warships. You have no military vessels in your system. You have no orbital defenses. You have nothing but miners and farmers. I will give you one chance to surrender. Lower your shields and prepare to accept Vasil authority." Captain Yuna's expression did not change. "You were warned what would happen if you entered our space. You have 29 minutes to leave." Transmission ended. Vesh shook his head. "Fools. Begin charging weapons. When the timer runs out, destroy their orbital station. Leave the planet intact. We can use the survivors as examples." What happened next confused the Vasil fleet. Every human on the planet stopped what they were doing at exactly the same moment. Miners left their equipment. Farmers abandoned their fields. Families gathered their children. In perfect coordination, 50,000 people began moving to underground bunkers. "Sir, the colony is evacuating," the sensor officer reported. "They are moving into underground facilities. All above-ground structures are being abandoned." "Let them hide like rodents," Vesh said. "They cannot hide from orbital bombardment. Continue charging weapons." 29 minutes passed. Not a single human remained on the surface of either planet. The cities stood empty. The stations were abandoned. New Hanyang had become a ghost colony. Sir? The sensor officer said suddenly. His voice had changed. It was no longer confident. I am detecting gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Multiple contacts appearing on sensors. I count 50 ships. No, 100. Sir, they are everywhere. Where did they come from? Vesh stared at his displays. Ships were appearing out of nowhere. They had been there all along, hidden by some kind of stealth technology. But not just a few ships. Hundreds of them. They surrounded his fleet on all sides. How many? Vesh demanded.
500 contacts, sir.
All human vessels. They were using gravitational camouflage. They were waiting for us. Before Vesh could respond, a transmission came through on all frequencies. It was Admiral Min Ho. He looked directly into the camera with cold, dark eyes. You were warned, Min Ho said. Then the transmission ended. The human fleet opened fire. Vesh had fought many battles. He knew what space combat looked like. Ships would exchange fire for hours. Shields would slowly weaken. Ships would be damaged and disabled. Boarding parties would fight for control. Battles took time. This was not a battle. This was an execution. The human weapons were like nothing the Vasil had ever seen. Kinetic accelerators fired metal slugs at impossible speeds. They punched through voxel shields like they were not even there. The slugs traveled so fast that when they hit a ship, the entire vessel simply exploded. Then came the torpedoes. They looked normal on sensors, but when they reached their targets, they did something impossible. They passed through the shields without triggering them. They phased into the ships themselves. Then they detonated. Vesh watched in horror as ship after ship on his fleet simply tore apart from the inside. Metal twisted and broke. Hulls shattered. Crews died without ever knowing what killed them. Return fire. Vesh screamed. All ships, return fire. The Vaxel fleet tried to fight back. They fired their plasma cannons and launched their missiles. But the human ships moved like nothing the Vaxil had ever encountered. They accelerated and changed direction in ways that should have crushed their crews. They dodged weapons fire that should have been impossible to avoid, and they never stopped shooting. A massive human warship appeared directly in front of Vesh's flagship. It was larger than anything in the Vaxil fleet. Weapons covered every surface. It fired a single shot. The shot hit the flagship's bridge. Everything went white. When Vesh's vision cleared, he was lying on the floor. Half the bridge crew was dead. Consoles were on fire. The ship was dying around him. Damage report, he gasped. All primary systems offline, someone said. It sounded like his second officer, but Vesh could not see through the smoke. Shields gone. Weapons gone. We are dead in space, the fleet. Gone, sir. All of them. 300 ships. All destroyed. We are the only survivors. Vesh pulled himself to his feet. He looked at the view screen. It showed the wreckage of his entire fleet. Hundreds of ships reduced to floating debris. And circling through the wreckage like sharks were the human vessels, completely undamaged. How long? Vesh asked. How long did the battle last? 14 minutes, sir. 14 minutes. The finest fleet in the Vasil military had been destroyed in 14 minutes. And the humans had not lost a single ship. A transmission came through. It was Captain Yuna again. She looked exactly the same as before. Calm. Professional. Not even celebrating her victory. Fleet Commander Vesh, she said. You have 1 hour to evacuate your crew to life pods. After that, we will destroy what remains of your ship. You will be picked up by Vasil rescue vessels and returned to your territory. You will deliver a message to your overlord. The message is simple. You were warned. The transmission ended. Vesh gave the order to abandon ship. As he climbed into a life pod, he thought about all the species the Empire had conquered. All the warnings they had ignored, all the threats they had dismissed, the humans had not threatened. They had not bluffed. They had simply stated a fact. And now, 300 ships and 30,000 Vasil warriors were dead because the Empire had not listened. The Vaxil High Council chamber had never been so quiet. 300 ships destroyed, 30,000 warriors dead. An entire fleet wiped out in 14 minutes without destroying a single human vessel. The numbers did not make sense. They could not make sense. Overlord Thrain stood before the council, his armor still bearing the marks of his victories. But today, those victories felt like ancient history. Today, he had to explain how the Empire had suffered its worst military defeat in 1,000 years. How is this possible? Counselor Drax demanded. He was old, even by Vaxil standards. He had seen the Empire grow from 20 systems to 400. We have conquered 73 species. How can these humans, these children, destroy an entire fleet? They were waiting for us, Thrain admitted. The words tasted like poison. They knew we would come. They prepared an ambush. Their weapons technology is more advanced than our intelligence suggested. More advanced? Another counselor shouted. They annihilated us. Fleet Commander Vesh reported weapons that pass through shields. Ships that move faster than our sensors can track. This is not more advanced. This is something we have never encountered. Thrain slammed his fist on the table. Then we will learn from this defeat. We will gather a larger fleet. We will study their tactics. We will crush them with overwhelming force. The Vaxil Empire does not accept defeat. The council erupted in agreement. Warriors did not fear death. They feared dishonor. And there was no greater dishonor than allowing an enemy to strike without response. How many ships can we mobilize? Counselor Drax asked. 2,000, Thrain said. Every dreadnought we have, every carrier, every battleship, we will throw the full might of the Empire at them. They cannot stand against such numbers. What the Vaxil did not know was that every word they spoke was being heard. Intelligence Officer Jiwoo sat in a secret facility deep beneath Earth's surface and listened to the entire council meeting. The Terrans had placed listening devices in the Vaxil flagship years ago. They knew every plan, every strategy, every weakness. Jiwoo recorded the meeting and sent it directly to Grand Admiral Quan. Quan was 70 years old and had spent 50 of those years preparing for war. Not because he wanted war, but because he knew it would come. Humanity had met too many aggressive species to believe peace would last forever. So while other species focused on exploration and trade, humanity had focused on survival. They are mobilizing 2,000 ships, Quan said to his officers. They will strike at our border in approximately 1 week. We will not wait for them to arrive, sir. One of the younger officers asked. We are going to attack first. We already attacked first when we destroyed their expeditionary fleet, Quan replied. Now, we are going to make sure they cannot sustain a long war. Dr. Mingy, what is the status of Operation Cascade? Dr. Mingy looked up from her datapad. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had not slept properly in years. She was also the most brilliant weapons designer humanity had ever produced. Ready for deployment, she said. Though I must remind the Admiral that using the Cascade virus violates 17 different treaties. Treaties with species that are not currently invading us, Quan said. And we are not using it on civilians. Only on military targets. How effective will it be? Devastating. The Vaxil use quantum communication networks for all their military systems. Once the virus enters their network, it will spread to every ship, every station, every computer core in their military infrastructure. Their ships will turn on each other or simply shut down. Quan nodded. And the antimatter mines? Already in place, said Commander Tai Yang. He led the Terran Special Operations Division. His teams had been infiltrating Vasil space for decades. We have mines planted in 32 shipyards and 17 military academies. When you give the order, they will detonate simultaneously. Very good, Quan said. He looked at his officers. They were young. Many had never seen real combat. But they were well trained and they understood what was at stake. Understand what we are about to do. We are going to cripple the Vaxil Empire's ability to make war. We will destroy their shipyards. We will eliminate their trained officers. We will break their fleet before it can reach our borders. This is not glory. This is not honor. This is survival. He pressed a button on his console. Across Vaxel space, Commander Taiyang's teams received their orders. The antimatter mines had been carefully placed over years of secret operations. Some were inside hollow walls. Some were hidden in maintenance systems. Some were disguised as regular equipment. The Voxil never suspected they were there, at exactly midnight Voxil Standard Time. 378 antimatter mines detonated. Shipyards that had built vessels for 1,000 years vanished in flashes of pure energy. Military academies where officers trained for decades disappeared. Manufacturing centers that produced weapons and armor ceased to exist. In 1 hour, the Voxel lost 60% of their ability to build new ships and half of their trained officer corps. The explosions killed 2 million. Voxel military personnel, not civilians, not families. Only soldiers and those who supported the war machine. Overlord Thrain stared at the reports in disbelief. How had the humans done this? How had they penetrated Vasil security so thoroughly? How long had they been preparing? Sir, his aide said quietly, we are receiving a transmission from the humans. From Grand Admiral Quan? The screen showed an old human with white hair and a face marked by time. But his eyes were sharp and cold. Overlord Thrain, Quan said. By now, you have discovered what we did to your military infrastructure. You are probably wondering how we did it. The answer is simple. While you were conquering other species, we were preparing for the day you would come for us. While you were celebrating your victories, we were placing agents in your systems. While you were planning your invasion, we were planning your defeat. Thrain felt rage building in his chest. You attack us without honor. Without warning? We gave you warning, Quan said calmly. Ambassador Hannah told you exactly what would happen. You chose not to listen. Now you face a choice. You can continue this war and watch your empire burn, or you can retreat and never enter Terran space again. Choose wisely. You will not get another chance. The transmission ended. Thrain wanted to scream. He wanted to order every ship to attack. He wanted to burn every human world until nothing remained but ash. But he was a warrior, not a fool. The humans had struck at the heart of the Empire. They had destroyed irreplaceable facilities. They had killed thousands of trained officers. And they had done it without ever entering Vaxil space. Cancel the invasion, he said quietly. His aide stared at him. Sir, cancel it. Pull back all ships. We need time to rebuild. Time to understand what we are facing. These humans are not like the other species we have conquered. They fight differently. They think differently. Should we sue for peace? Thrain looked at the screen where Quan's face had been. No, not yet. We will rebuild. We will learn from this. And then we will show these humans what the Empire is truly capable of. But we will not fight them on their terms. Not yet. The order went out to pull back the invasion fleet. The 2,000 ships that had been preparing to destroy humanity turned around and headed home, but both sides knew this was not over. The Empire had been wounded, and wounded predators were the most dangerous kind. 6 months passed. The Voxil Empire rebuilt. They studied the wreckage of their destroyed ships. They analyzed every second of the battle. They upgraded their shields and developed new weapons. And Overlord Thrain planned his revenge. The invasion fleet gathered at the edge of Vaxil space. 2,000 ships was no longer enough. Thrain had assembled every vessel the Empire could spare. Dreadnoughts the size of cities. Carrier ships holding thousands of fighters. Battleships with weapons that could crack planets. The fleet numbered 3,000 vessels. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. This time there will be no mistakes, Thrain told his commanders. This time, we will not underestimate them. This time, the humans will burn. The fleet entered human space at the system they called Threshold. It marked the boundary between Voxil and Terran territory. The Vaxil expected to fight through human defenses, system by system. They expected a long war. Instead, They found Grand Admiral Quan waiting for them. The Terran defense fleet sat between the Vaxel Armada and human territory. Quan had brought every ship humanity possessed. 3,000 vessels faced 3,000 vessels. The two fleets stared at each other across the empty void of space. "This is impossible," Thrain's tactical officer said. "How do they have so many ships?" "Our intelligence said they only had 500 vessels." Thrain studied the displays. The human ships were smaller than Vasil dreadnoughts, but there were so many of them. And unlike last time, the humans were not hiding. They were showing their full strength. They have been building in secret, Thrain realized. Just like they placed mines in our facilities. They have been preparing for this war for years, perhaps decades. A transmission came from the human fleet. Grand Admiral Quan appeared on screen. He looked older than before, more tired, but his eyes still held that same cold determination. "Overlord Thrain," Quan said, "you have one final chance to turn back. Leave our space and never return. This is the last warning you will receive." Thrain laughed. "You cannot warn me with equal numbers. Human, my ships are larger. My weapons are more powerful. And my warriors have conquered the galaxy while your species was still learning to make fire." "Very well," Quan said. "Then we will show you what humans learned while you were conquering primitives. We learned that survival matters more than honor, that victory matters more than glory, and that the species who adapts fastest is the species that lives." The transmission ended. Both fleets opened fire. The Battle of Threshold began. The Vaxel fought using formations they had perfected over thousands of years. Their dreadnoughts formed a wall of shields and weapons. Their carriers launched fighter wings that swarmed like insects. Their battleships targeted human vessels with precision strikes. The humans fought like pack hunters. Commander Hun led her fighter squadron through the Vaxel formation. Her ships did not try to destroy the massive dreadnoughts. Instead, they attached magnetic boarding pods to the hulls and kept flying. Within seconds, special operations teams led by Commander Tai Yang were cutting through the hulls and entering the ships, but they were not there to capture the vessels. They were there to turn off the shields and broadcast targeting data. "Shields down on Dreadnought 7, Heian reported. Transmitting coordinates now." Terran battleship fired a single shot. The Dreadnought, now defenseless, exploded. This happened again and again. Human fighters would sacrifice themselves to plant boarding teams. The teams would disable shields. The battleships would destroy the defenseless targets. The Vaxel formation began to break apart. "They are inside our ships." A Vaxel commander screamed over the communications. "How did they board us so quickly?" "All ships activate internal defenses," Thrain ordered. "Seal all corridors. Hunt down these infiltrators." But hunting humans inside a spaceship was like hunting ghosts. Tai Yang's teams knew the layout of Vaxel ships better than the crews did. They moved through maintenance shafts and access tunnels. They ambushed Vaxel security forces from hidden positions. They were not trying to take the ships. They were trying to cause chaos, and it was working. Then Dr. A. Mingy unleashed the Cascade virus. The virus entered through the Vaxel quantum communication network. It looked like a normal data packet. By the time the Vaxel realized what it was, the virus had already spread to 100 ships, then 500. Then 1,000 infected ships began behaving strangely. Some shut down completely, floating dead in space. Others turned their weapons on nearby Vaxel vessels. The virus convinced their targeting computers that friendly ships were enemies. "Sir, we are being fired upon by our own fleet," a Vaxel commander reported. "Disconnect from the quantum network," Thrain ordered. "All ships go to isolated systems." But disconnecting from the network meant losing coordination. Ships could no longer communicate quickly. Formation became impossible. The Vaxel fleet descended into chaos. The humans pressed their advantage. Their ships moved in coordinated strikes, targeting damaged vessels and finishing them off. They used kinetic weapons that punched through weakened shields. They used quantum torpedoes that phased inside hulls and detonated. Thrain watched his fleet die around him. This was not a battle. This was a slaughter. The humans were not fighting with honor or following the rules of warfare. They were fighting to win at any cost. "Sir, we have lost over 1,800 ships," his tactical officer reported. The young Vaxiel's voice shook with fear. "We must retreat." "No," Thrain roared. "We will not run from these primitives. All remaining ships, focus fire on their flagship. We will kill their admiral and break their spirit." Every Vaxel ship that could still fight turned toward Quan's vessel. Hundreds of weapons fired at once. The human flagship's shields flared bright as they absorbed the impact. For a moment, Thrain thought they might actually destroy it. Then the shields held, and Quan's ship returned fire. The human flagship had a weapon the Vaxel had never seen before. It fired a beam of pure energy that cut through space like a sword. The beam touched a Vaxel dreadnought, and the entire ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion. No debris. It just vanished. Thrain stared in horror. "What was that?" "Unknown, sir. Some kind of directed energy weapon." It completely disintegrated the target at the molecular level. The human flagship fired again. Another dreadnought vanished. Then another. "All ships retreat." Thrain finally screamed. "Fall back to Vasil space." Retreat. What remained of the Voxel fleet turned and ran. Of the 3,000 ships that had entered the battle, only 153 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured. The humans had lost 412 ships. Not an insignificant number, but compared to the Vaxil losses, it was a complete victory. Thrain sat on the bridge of his damaged flagship as it limped back to Vaxil territory. His armor was scorched. His crew was dead or dying. And for the first time in his long military career, he felt true fear. "They were not primitives," he said quietly to himself. "They were never primitives. We were just too arrogant to see it." His communications officer, one of the few crew members still alive, looked at him. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Ambassador Hannah." The screen showed the same human woman who had delivered the first warning months ago. She looked exactly the same. Calm, professional, no triumph in her voice. "Overlord Thrain," Hannah said, "you were warned. Now you will listen. The war is over. You will surrender unconditionally, or we will finish what we started. You have 24 hours to decide." Thrain looked at the ruins of his fleet. He thought about the thousands of warriors who had died following his orders. He thought about the empire that had stood for 10,000 years, and he realized they had lost the moment they ignored the first warning. "Send a response," he said quietly. "Tell them we surrender." The Vaxel High Council chamber was different now. Where once there had been pride and confidence, now there was only shame and fear. The counselors wore no ceremonial armor. They carried no weapons. They sat in simple chairs and waited for the humans to deliver their terms. Ambassador Hannah entered the chamber with Admiral Minho and 3 other Terran officials. Behind them came Counselor Nari, a severe woman who had spent her career studying warfare and military law. She carried a data tablet containing the peace treaty. Overlord Thrain stood as they entered. He looked older somehow. The war had aged him in ways that decades of conquest never had. His armor was gone. He wore simple gray clothing. The marks of his victories had been removed, Ambassador Hannah Thrain said. "Admiral Minho, we are ready to hear your terms." Hannah nodded to Counselor Nari, who stepped forward and activated a holographic display. The terms of surrender appeared in the air between them. "The Terran Alliance demands the following," Nari said. Her voice was cold and formal. "First, the Vaxel Empire will surrender all military vessels larger than a corvette class. These ships will be decommissioned under Terran supervision." A counselor gasped. "You would leave us defenseless." "You will be left with sufficient forces to maintain internal security and defend against pirates," Nari replied. "You will not be left with enough ships to threaten your neighbors or invade another species," she continued. "Second, the Empire will cede 15 border systems to create a demilitarized buffer zone. These systems will remain empty of military forces from both sides. Any attempt to militarize this zone will be considered an act of war." Thrain closed his eyes. 15 systems. Thousands of voxel citizens would need to be relocated. Worlds his people had held for centuries would be abandoned. Third, Nari said, the Empire will pay reparations to the Terran Alliance. The payment will continue for 200 years. The exact amount will be calculated based on your economic capacity, but it will be substantial. 200 years? Another counselor asked. That is 10 generations. That is the price of ignoring a warning, Admiral Minho said. It was the first time he had spoken. You chose this war. You will pay for it. Nari moved to the fourth term. Any Vaxel vessel that enters Terran space for any reason will be destroyed without warning. No diplomatic ships. No trade vessels. No science missions. The border is absolute. This is not negotiable. The fifth and final term appeared. The Empire will erect monuments on every Vaxel world. These monuments will tell the story of this war. They will describe how you were warned and refused to listen. They will serve as a reminder to future generations that actions have consequences. Thrain looked at the terms. They were harsh, but not impossible. The humans could have demanded the complete dissolution of the Empire. They could have occupied Vaxel territory. They could have done what the Voxel had done to 73 other species and enslaved them all, instead. They had created terms that would hurt but allow the Empire to survive. Why? Thrain asked. Why not destroy us completely? You have the power, Ambassador Hannah answered. Because we are not conquerors, Overlord. We do not seek to rule other species. We do not want your territory or your resources. We simply want to be left alone. These terms ensure that you will remember the cost of violating our borders. They ensure that you will think very carefully before threatening anyone else in the galaxy. And they ensure that other species learn from your mistake. Counselor Nari activated another display. The entire war has been recorded. Every battle, every warning you ignored, every ship you lost. We will broadcast this information to every species in the galaxy. They will see what happens when someone threatens humanity. They will see that our warnings are not empty threats. Thrain understood then? The humans were not just punishing the Vaxil. They were sending a message to the entire galaxy. They were establishing a reputation. They were making sure that no other species would make the same mistake. We accept your terms, Thrain said. The words felt like swallowing broken glass. Very good, Hannah said. You have 1 year to comply with the disarmament requirements. We will be monitoring your progress. If you attempt to hide ships or build new weapons, we will know, and we will respond appropriately. The Terran delegation left the chamber. Thrain sat down heavily in his chair. Around him, the counselors were silent. How did this happen? Counselor Drax finally asked. How did we go from ruling 400 systems to being dictated terms by a species we thought were primitives? Because we underestimated them, Thrain said. We saw their small territory and young civilization and thought they were weak. We did not see what they really were. Survivors. Humans did not evolve as the strongest species on their planet. They evolved as the most adaptable, the most relentless, the most willing to do whatever it took to survive. He stood up and looked at the empty chamber. We learned the same lessons 73 other species learned. But those species learned it early enough to surrender. We did not. And now we pay the price. 50 years passed. The galaxy changed in those 5 decades. The Vaxel Empire no longer expanded. They became a defensive power, focused on protecting what they had rather than taking what others owned. The monuments on every Vaxel world told the story of their defeat. Children grew up knowing what happened when you ignored a warning from humanity. But the Vaxel were not the only ones who changed. Other species in the galaxy learned the lesson too. The broadcasts of the war had reached every corner of known space. Every species saw how quickly and completely the humans had destroyed a fleet of 3,000 ships. Every ambassador saw what happened to those who trespassed in Terran territory. The Terran border became the most respected boundary in the galaxy. New species that achieved faster than light travel would make, their first diplomatic contact with humanity. It became a test of civilization. If you could approach the humans with respect, follow their rules, and honor their warnings, you were considered ready to join the galactic community. If you could not, you were considered too dangerous to interact with. The humans did not seek this role. They did not want to be the guardians of galactic civilization, but their actions had consequences. And those consequences shaped the future. Ambassador Hannah, now old and gray, stood at the dedication of a memorial on Earth. The memorial honored the 412 ships and 50,000 personnel lost in the Battle of Threshold. It was a reminder that victory came at a cost. Do you regret it? A young diplomat asked her. The war. The deaths. Everything that happened. Hannah looked at the names carved into the memorial wall. Each name represented someone who had died defending humanity. Defending the principle that borders meant something, that warnings had weight. I regret that it was necessary, she said. I regret that the Vaxel did not listen to the first warning, but I do not regret what we did. We protected our people. We showed the galaxy that humanity would not be pushed around, and we established a peace that has lasted 50 years. She paused. The Empire was warned. They chose not to listen. That was their mistake, not ours. Admiral Minho, now retired and using a cane to walk, joined her at the memorial. He looked at the names too. Do you think it will last? He asked. The peace. As long as other species remember what happened here, Hannah replied. As long as they understand that our warnings are not threats, they are promises. Minho nodded. Then we did our job. We kept humanity safe. We taught the galaxy that borders matter, and we showed them that humans always mean what we say. They stood together in silence, two old veterans remembering a war that had changed the galaxy. Behind them, the memorial bore a simple inscription in a dozen languages. They were warned. They did not listen. Remember this lesson, so their sacrifice was not in vain. Across the galaxy, on every Vaxel world, similar monuments stood. The inscriptions varied slightly, but they all told the same story. The story of an empire that thought it could ignore a warning from a young species. The story of 3,000 ships destroyed because arrogance blinded wisdom. The story of a lesson learned too late and in the deep dark spaces between the stars. Human ships continued their silent patrol, watching the borders, maintaining the sensors, ready to respond if anyone forgot the lesson that the Vaxel Empire had paid for in blood. The border was absolute. The warning was final. And humanity was ready to enforce both, because that was what humans did best. They survived, they adapted, and they never, ever bluffed.